Hey, welcome to Graphic Novels. We are going to talk about the background for Persepolis by Mary Jane Satrapi and a little bit about Iran's history. So, our desired result is, what value do graphic novels have as a literary medium? At the end of the lesson, students will be able to understand the historical context in preparation for reading Persepolis by Mary Jane Satrapi. So, want to look at these pictures and kind of think if what you know about Iran, if anything, or if anything at all, or a lot, or a little, or nothing. So, graphic novel memoir is this is a graphic novel memoir depicting the author's childhood and early adult years in Iran. It's published in 4 volumes between 2000 and 2003. Before reading, we're going to gain some background knowledge of Iran and the events that affect the text. So, Iran comes from the word Aryan. Aryans settled here in 1500 BC. Descendants were the Medes and the Persians. Eventually, the whole territory became known as the Persian Empire. In 1935, Reza Shah changed the name from Persia to Iran. So we can see here where Iran is. We can see near Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. It's kind of in the middle here. So, ancient Iran dynasties and invasions. Though Iran has a great history of building vast empires, many groups over the years fought to seize control of the country. During Darius's reign in 518 BC, Persepolis was built. Persepolis was a vast palace complex that included temples, government buildings, and a place for special ceremonies. The construction took more than 200 years and represented the Persian Empire's might. Carvings were covered in gold and bronze and lapis. So, as you can see, very, very monumental, huge, over the top, covered in all this gold and bronze. In the 4th century BC, Alexander the Great burned the royal palace at Persepolis and made Persia part of his Greek Empire. Today, all that remains is the stone underneath. Still, this is the most visited site in Iran. We had the Kahar dynasty. Early in the 1800s, Russians wanted access to Persian Gulf, and the British wanted to keep their trade route to India. So the Kahars needed the money, so they made a deal with both countries, both the British and Russian banks, mining control of Iranian industries. The Kahar Shahs grew wealthy, but the Iranian economy declined. The Iranian people grew angry, and in response, the Shah at the time, if you can see the picture here, created a constitution. Thus, Iran's first elected legislator, the Majlis, was formed. In 1908, oil was discovered in Iran. The British took control over the oil industry, and they took most of the profits. The people of Iran obviously did not like this arrangement, and discontent spread. Reza Shah. So Reza Shah Pahlavi was a general in the Persian army who led the coup d'etat to overthrow the last Kahar Shah in 1923. He sought to modernize Iran, reintroduce the power of the clergy, built a national education system, and opened the University of Tehran. He gave women the right to vote and freed them from Islamic obligation to wear head-to-toe chador at all times. Men began wearing suits instead of traditional Iranian clothes. Ordered the first railroads across the country to be built. Leading into World War II, the Allied forces, especially Britain and the Soviet Union, wanted to ensure that Iranian oil would continue to reach the front. Both nations sent troops into Iran to prevent Nazi Germany from gaining control there. However, Reza Shah favored Germany because, 1, he resented British and Soviet intrusions, and 2, many Germans were living and working in Iran at the time. Mohammad Reza Shah. In 1941, the British and the Soviets forced Reza Shah out of power. His 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza, replaced him as Shah. You can see the picture here. Early on, he was heavily influenced by the British, who still controlled the Anglo-Iranian oil company. Most of the money produced by Iran's oil industry went to the British. Then we have a battle over Iran's oil. In 1951, Iranian politician Mohammad Mossadegh spoke out against the British control, and many supported the stance. In response, the Iranian government naturalized the oil industry. In 1953, the British began a boycott of Iranian oil. People lost jobs, and the nation's oil industry suffered. Supporters of Mossadegh, now Iran's prime minister, fought supporters of the Shah. The Shah fled the country. The British convinced the U.S. to help remove Mossadegh from office. He was forced out, and Reza Shah returned. Oil industry was denationalized only now that the British did not control it all. The U.S. now had 40% control. Modernization and corruption. Like his father, Reza Shah wanted to modernize the country, schools, hospitals, roads, etc. And women could now hold public office. He also, however, grew more and more dictatorial. The Shah outlawed all political parties but his own. Freedom of speech was limited. Those who spoke out against him were imprisoned, while some were killed. Meanwhile, the economy suffered. Huge protests against the Shah became common. Opposition grew in the 1970s, especially among two groups: communist inspired students and intellectuals who wanted genuine and democratic reform. Muslim fundamentalists, or believers in the strictest possible interpretation of Islamic doctrine. Many religious leaders felt his changes were a threat to Islam. Then we have Khomeini. A Muslim leader named Ayatollah Khomeini was one of the Shah's most vocal opponents. He condemned the Shah for being corrupt and in the pocket of the United States. And we see the Islamic Revolution. The Shah fled in 1979. Ayatollah Khomeini became real leader. He declared Iran an Islamic republic. The religious clerics must rule. Iran became a true theocracy, which is an official religion, as the supreme government authority. Khomeini and the Islamic Revolution. Khomeini ruled with an iron fist, which meant death to those who supported or worked with the Shah, women forced to wear chador, which is a veil, and walk only with male relative in public. The University of Tehran closed for 2 years. Newspapers shut down. History books were rewritten. Schools divided by sex. Many Iranians fled, and westernized intellectuals, those associated with the Shah, or those who simply had grown accustomed to the Western style. Then there's an Iran hostage crisis. In 1979, Reza Shah was allowed to enter the U.S. Iranian students went to U.S. embassy in Tehran and took 50 people hostage. They demanded that the U.S. send the Shah back to Iran to stand trial, but the U.S. refused. The hostages were held for more than a year. Then we have the Iran-Iraq War. In 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. Saddam Hussein wanted to take advantage of Iran's chaos. War lasted 8 years and affected cities, oil facilities, and people. Each country maintained an army of 600,000. To keep forces staffed, both sides enlisted boys as young as 11 or 12 years old. Each side claimed this as a holy war. Ceasefire was declared in 1988. After Khomeini died in 1989 and millions of people mourned in the streets, Sayyid Ali Khamenei took over as spiritual and political leader of Iran, and he still holds the title of supreme leader. A moderate cleric named Ayatollah Muhammad Khatami became president in 1997. Hoping to improve the status of women and give more people a voice, he was also friendlier to the West. He was unable to accomplish much due to resistance from more conservative and powerful government leaders. So, where does Persepolis fit in? Persepolis is written through the perspective of a young girl who's living through all this political and cultural turmoil. The novel begins in 1980, although it also discusses events from 1979. Through her point of view, we learn about the overthrow of the King Reza Shah, the Islamic Revolution, and the Iran-Iraq War. As you are reading, consider how the historical events of Margine and the people around her. So at the end of the lesson, you should be able to understand the historical context in preparation for reading Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi.